Pain is a terrible word. 4 little letters that I used to believe meant I can't, or I'm broken, or worse. But today, on episode 124, I speak with Ryan Whited and Matt Fitzgerald, co-authors of Pain and Performance, to hear the origin story behind training as treatment and the 3-step process that we can all use to get back on the path to better performance and less downtime and less hassle with pain solutions that don't work. While pain is communication, it does not mean injury or imbalance or wear and tear, and we can be more self-sufficient in managing pain if we only know how. All right, let's talk to Ryan Whited and Matt Fitzgerald. Hey guys, welcome back to the WiseAthletes podcast.
Thank you for having us.
The Ryan Whited and Matt Fitzgerald, authors of the book Pain and Performance. Matt has been on the show before, but Ryan, you're new. But you guys have co-authored this new book, which is what our talk today is going to be about. And so why don't you guys give us a short intro about yourselves? Who are you? And then we'll talk a little bit about this book.
I am a strength coach of around 30 years. I was a sponsored athlete for around 20 years, and I am the son of a professional athlete. I also am, I guess I could add, author to that list now. So,
yes.
Along with business owner. We own a small business called Paragon Athletics that's a training facility here in Flagstaff. And we work with, outdoor athletes of every sort. And we've also earned a reputation of helping people through rough patches, meaning painful experiences, injuries that have just been persistent. It's not like we advertise that. It's just word of mouth kind of got around that we had a good rate of success with it.
Well, good. I imagine we're going to hear more about that. Perhaps that's the basis of this book. But anyway, Matt, and your background for the audience members who haven't heard the earlier podcast we did with you.
Sure thing. So I have been a runner since I was 11 years old. I've been a writer almost as long. Got to marry my 2 favorite passions together. I've written a lot of books for endurance athletes. I'm also a coach. I own a couple of businesses, perhaps the most familiar of which is 80/20 Endurance, which provides training and educational resources for endurance athletes and coaches.
Fantastic. Okay, so before we get into some of the details here, tell us how you guys, I guess, came together to write this book, but also where did the knowledge base come from in putting this together? I have a feeling, Ryan, that the system, the process was something that you came up with as a part of this business that you run, and Matt was the professional writer, and together you guys made a great team.
That's pretty much the case. Yeah, I didn't mean to get as obsessed about the topic of pain as I did. It just happened. And then I realized that we were coming at this from such a wrong direction. And over time and practice, I say system, but it's kind of loose. It's more like cookery, like it's science for sure. But it's definitely science more like cookery and less like mathematics, if that makes sense. So Matt was at a talk that I give and I have been giving for quite a few years called Pain and Performance. And he was at Rob Carr's run camp. And on occasion, my talk will line up with Rob's camp, and those campers will attend my talk. And Matt happened to be at one of those talks. It landed right with him, and we ended up circling back, and the message resonated, and he decided we should probably write a book together about it.
Fantastic. Well, I have read this book. It is a very good book. And the way you guys did it, I think, is really compelling. But anyway, I don't want to spoil the drama here. You guys, let me start by saying that as I was preparing for our talk today, I went back through the episodes of the podcast, and the topic of pain comes up a lot. I guess maybe that's not unexpected in a podcast for older athletes, but since the episodes tend to be things that I'm personally interested in, it probably means that I have had my share of, pain problems. And so So I've got a lot of questions, but maybe let me just first ask you this question because it's on the back of your book. It says, "What if everything you know about pain is wrong?" Ooh, that's a big question, and you actually have it in all bold. So, why do you ask that question?
Well, I think it's built into our culture to assume that pain is directly correlated to damage. And we know now, and we have known for several years, that that is just not how pain works, that it's multifactorial and it's never in isolation. So any pain experience is never in isolation, ever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, where I have sort of gotten to after reading your book and thinking about it a bit, that you can't just talk about pain as a thing. Pain is a whole body and brain thing, and so I think that's what you're saying. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. It is. Now they're using terminology like pain system because it's like an axis, sort of, so to speak, because we know that there's so much, so many overlapping systems that are
Yeah,
playing a role in your pain experience.
exactly. Sort of like talking about what causes inflammation. Well, a lot of
Right,
things cause
right.
inflammation. Um, okay. Well, so
Worry can cause inflammation.
yeah, yeah. Maybe we know what doesn't cause inflammation. So, I mean, obviously, the people who are the 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 most obvious targets of a message about everything you know about pain is wrong are people who are having problems, right? They've tried everything they can think of, and they just are not getting any satisfaction from it, and so the mainstream medical practices. Physical therapy, but maybe they've tried chiropractic or acupuncture. They've tried more things and they still have problems. And so these are people who are looking for something else to try. But it seems to me that the more important thing is just this idea that anybody who ever experiences pain, okay, so that's everybody. The better we understand what that is, the fewer myths we carry around in our heads, the better off we're going to be. The less fear we have to walk around with, the less suffering, we have to endure. Who would you say you wrote the book for?
Years ago, started working with so many athletes that would get stuck in treatment programs and just would get in a loop of care, and they believed that they were dysfunctional. They believed they were asymmetries that were causing their pain. They had all these beliefs that propagated a sense of fragility and dependence on treatment. So initially, those are the folks that, and I was one of those people, by the way,
Uh,
uh, that those were the folks I was hoping to reach with a new context of pain. And then it ended up just spreading to anybody that is trying to be an active, healthy human and keeps running into a roadblock, with pain. So it ended up being everybody, really.
yeah, right. I mean that's just it. The older I get, the more that makes perfectly good sense to me. I am a very healthy person, but I have pain essentially all the
Mm-hmm.
time. Now, I'm lucky in that it's not so bad that it really stops me from doing anything, except
Mm-hmm.
sometimes from sleeping, which is a nuisance. But, some people have it bad, right? They can't do their thing. They can't be themselves. So, yeah, I think that bigger story is the right story. Okay, but before we get into, what is this and what can people do, but I definitely want to get there. Why don't we start with how do you guys think about what pain is?
Well, I could give you a definition
Okay.
uh, from the International Association of the Study of Pain, their current definition. So it was given a new definition about, I think it was probably about 6 years ago, they reworked it in my little world of pain scientists that I've been allowed to be a part of for some reason.
Yeah.
It was a big topic of conversation, how the wording should go. But what ended up sticking was an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage.
Actual or potential. Huh. Okay. Well, because I mean, obviously, what you had already mentioned it earlier. As I grew up, pain was the thing that happened when I put my hand on a hot stove, and the pain alerted me that something was wrong and I should move my hand off of the hot stove.
Mm-hmm.
But I've come to understand that it is a lot more complicated than that. Sometimes there's pain that's not related to a hot stove or even to any real problem in my body. Sometimes it's just maybe it's a threat of a problem that might happen or maybe happened before and that sort of thing. Can you elaborate on, what are the various aspects of pain that people that you've helped experience?
Yeah, there are many moving parts. So if you had to move a hot stove to get your foot out from under the car, then you might be willing to put your hand on that burning on that burner. So for a moment, I guess you kind of prioritize things, with your nervous system and value at the time. But yes, there's past inner experiences that play a role. So it builds in expectation into an activity, and actually even like if you were raised in a household where one of your parents suffered back pain, then that starts building out a story for you, and you are more likely to have significant back pain, but not because of the biomechanics involved that you inherited from your parents, but from the psychosocial things that you adopted.
Mm.
So there are many things to bring to the table with pain experience.
All right. So it's obviously pain can be related to damage in the body, but is not necessarily. And it even could be that there is damage, but no pain, as your
Right.
body prioritizes something else over that pain.
The danger there are many dangers when you think of pain just being musculoskeletal. That causal line of thinking, where it's just a linear line of this equals that,
Yeah.
can lead you down such a bad path of goose chasing some more than likely irrelevant thing, and you end up playing whack-a-mole with something that's already impeding your life. And so when you just think of pain as with that limited lens of musculoskeletal, very, very limited lens of musculoskeletal, then it is going to set you up for some problems. It's more damaging than it is helpful most often.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's come back to that. This whole, I think what is called structuralism or something like that,
That's one
where
of the pathoanatomy.
But before we jump there, I wanted to read my own quote here. Lisa Feldman Barrett says, "An emotion is your brain's creation of what your bodily sensations mean in relation to what is going on around you. In other words, in every waking moment, your brain uses past experiences organized as concepts to guide your action and to give your sensations meaning." I'd read that in one of her books, and that kind of okay, and it had kind of rung a bell with this pain thing, where pain started to feel kind of like an emotion. It had that sort of shape to it. But certainly pain is one of these things that the brain uses as it communicates and tries to influence what the body does. And so there's a lot of moving parts. And so, but if pain is like an emotion, then maybe I have to deal with my pain like I have to deal with my emotions. Covering it up, ignoring it, that can work for a while. Like I could, if I'm anxious about giving a speech, well, I could have 2 beers and I feel less anxious. That's probably not a great way to solve that problem. And it might have other problems come from that eventually. I mean, maybe the better thing to do would be to find out, why am I anxious? And is it right for me to be afraid about this? And, and try to get that emotion to, change into something else, more like excitement and, fun anticipation and things like that. And maybe, dealing with the pain rather than covering it up with a painkiller or something, or just playing through it. Maybe there's some parallel there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Reframing that experience, which is part of what our goal was, is bring a totally different context to that experience, is very helpful. A personal anecdote is I took a fail grade on every oral exam that I was asked to give as a kid because of the anxiety that I would have. And I now, what actually keeps me up the night before a talk is that I get excited about sharing good news. And it's really interesting how this happened over time, because it's no longer, I mean, there's some natural anxiety there, but not an inordinate amount that I had at one time. What she was referring to in the book, Lisa Barrett Cohen, is something called predictive processing. It's a cognitive model that is being used. And the idea is that you are predicting from past experiences, you're anticipating what will happen. And so I have so many analogies that I use to help people understand and help and reframe. One of them is a barking dog. So when you said, if you take an NSAID, or if you just choose to ignore your pain, it's a little bit like a barking dog at a window. We've all had, either you've had that barking dog or you've had a friend that's had that barking dog that just won't start barking. Even if there's no real threat, it will bark. So you can either close the door, but that dog's going to continue barking, or you can start working with that dog and helping it figure out what's an actual threat and what is not an actual threat.
Right.
Which takes time.
That's a good example. Excellent. Yeah, I have 2 dogs. I know exactly what you're talking about. All right. Well, okay, good. So let's talk a little bit about the problem with, the solutions that everybody's trying, and sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't work, and, and they get into this loop that you were talking about. And I'm not sure where I got this from. Maybe I stole it from you, but this idea that people love to think in analogies. Yeah, we were just talking about the bark and dog analogy. And so as people try to understand where does the pain come from, they try to think of the body as like a machine, right? And if the machine gets out of balance, or the machine is not being lubricated, or, anyway, so we try to make analogies of things that we understand, and then we think we understand what's happening with the body. And it turns out, well, that's not true, because the body is way more complicated than some engine that a human being built. The body has evolved over millions of years, only more recently turned into the shape of a human being. And it evolved in a environment of scarcity. So it has become very efficient at managing its resources and responding to threats. And so, everybody's had the experience of wondering why can't I stop myself from eating those cookies? Okay, well, here we go. We're talking about very complicated integrated systems, and you're not really in control of all of it. Anyway, maybe you can speak to the problems. You talked about it a little bit already, where they start doing whack-a-mole, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And the person trained in that silo, that's sort of their bag of tricks. So I don't really know what to do now. Maybe over time they get trained in other modalities, and now they've got a big bag of tricks, and they go from this to that to the other thing. but ultimately each one of them is based on a set of assumptions and an analogy that's overly simplistic of how the body works. That's wrong. Heck, a broken clock is right twice a day. And so, eventually they hit somebody, who
Right.
then that thing worked for some reason.
Right.
And more confident they are, probably the better, for giving the patient some confidence, but still they were really being too simplistic. And so I don't know if you want to talk about that or if you just want to leap past that into the what's a better way.
The bag of tricks that I bring to the table is negative knowledge. I don't know if you've ever heard this term.
No.
So negative knowledge is basically I know enough about all of these topics that I know that 98% of them should just be removed. And my negative knowledge brings a great deal of value to the table. The other part of the process is what you bring to the table. All those millions of years of developing and changing, that is the magic that's brought to the table in quotations.
So the body knows what to do and you just need to let the body do its thing?
You're pretty much, that's why I think it sometimes is a mistake to distinguish between treatment and training. I just think you're training sometimes with pain present in that experience, but you're still training. So I don't like to discern the differences, and it's not like me being not anything personal to anybody that is a therapist or anything. It's just I think it's not good for us to distinguish that. You don't need to become a patient when you're having an experience that is common to everyone.
Okay. All right. Well, so
answer.
Well, it's we've only got a little bit of time together, so yes. And but I do think that we're going to want to get to how should people think about it, and presumably some of what people can do, they can do on their own, and they don't have to get help from somebody who's treated 500 people successfully. They have the right mindset, and they can have confidence in what they know, and they can get through some of these things on their own. And so one of the things that people would like to take away from listening to the podcast is, well, what can I try? How can I try this for myself? And hopefully we can share some of that with them. But we've already said that if you have pain in your body, that doesn't mean that you have damage in your body. Everybody's heard of they do MRIs of people of different ages, and they look at their knees or their shoulders, and there's very little correlation between people who've got changes in their structures and people who have pain. Mm-hmm. Yes, your structures change over time and it maybe looks like damage, but it's just
changes.
It's just changes. And people who have the same changes as you have no pain. So the fact that you've got that in your MRI, that's not the reason you have pain. I mean, maybe it is. I mean, heck, if I know, but not necessarily.
It's not causal. It's not causal. That's the line that we have to change.
Right. So we don't want to go back and change that structure to be more like it was when you were 15, because having that same exact structure, lots of people don't have any pain.
Right. So one of my favorite pieces of research to cite during this is they looked at asymptomatic volleyball players, female volleyball players, and the set was around 100. And average age of 18, 62% of them had what appeared to be disc degeneration at average age of 18.
18. Wow.
So that we just have to completely change our line of thinking for what causes pain. So it's a post hoc fallacy. I don't know if you're familiar with that term.
No. But
it's a logical fallacy. So that we assumed this, therefore that. We assumed, this equals that. Yeah. And it is just not that simple.
Well, it fits into the analogy that if the machine is out of balance, then it's not going to work well. So, it just fed what I was assuming was true in the first place.
Right. Yeah. And, we just drove across I-40 from Arkansas for Christmas, visiting my folks. And I looked at all those trees on I-40 and how they were bent from the wind. And I thought all those trees have just naturally changed with their environment, what's been asked of them. But I didn't look over at that tree and go, that thing is messed up. Look at it.
We got to straighten that tree.
Yeah. It's supposed to be symmetrical and it needs to be straight. Yeah.
Exactly. That's a really good point. Yeah. So let's get into, what's new here. You talked about negative knowledge. I think you called it
negative knowledge.
And, essentially, I think what you mean is discard all of that. Don't try to understand what's wrong with it. Just don't talk about that. Let's talk about what does help.
Mm-hmm. What does help, exactly. And using those low value systems or modalities of care can just lead you through such a frustrating path. When I say low value modalities, it's those things that we typically go to. And like I said, I'm not, against most of those modalities. They have a function. They have a place to be used. But what I tell people is use massage and things of that sort like a condiment. Don't use it like it's something you can live on, because you're just going to end up hungry all the time.
All right. Well, so training as a treatment, I think you call it. Tell us what that is.
Essentially, it's what I was just talking about, where I feel like you can be training in the middle of a pretty profound pain experience and still just call it training. 2 years ago, I had the worst climbing injury I've ever had. I had a high ankle sprain. Thankfully, I've been a boulder for nearly 30 years, which being 50 years old and hucking myself off 20-foot rocks, I'm thankful that that's the most significant injury I've had.
Yeah, I can beat that.
But it was a long road. I don't know if you're familiar with the high ankle sprain, but it's a very complex injury. And I have a friend that's a foot and ankle ortho who, oddly enough, had the same injury really close to when I did. He had surgery, and I opted to not have surgery. There is no wrong and right in that scenario. It's personal. But it was such an emotional roller coaster. I fell, and it was during my warm-up, but a fleck of chalk went in my eye. So it caused me to blink when I jumped down. So I hit the edge of our crash pad. I knew immediately I got sick, and I went, oh, I'm really hurt. This is different than most pain experiences because this was, an acute injury. But I basically started retraining my ankle the next day. So it never, and yes, there were definitely ups and downs. We were supposed to go on a climbing trip. A week later, we went. I knew driving over there that I was not going to be climbing. I ended up climbing, but that's because I'm stubborn. But also, everybody went out one day, and my ankle did not feel like it was quite up to it just yet. And so I thought, I'm just going to hang back at camp. And so that's what I did. I hung back, and I thought, I'm just going to go for a walk. I got 40 yards from our van and hit a offset in the pavement. We were at Joshua Tree. Hit an offset in the pavement that was, the height of a nickel. Went to the ground, fell beside a trash can, and just laid there for a while and thought, this is not a fun experience. Being at a climbing area with my friends and struggling.
Yeah.
But I just kind of kept training. I never really stopped training. And yes, it was an emotional roller coaster, as we all have been on those roller coasters, and it went on for about 2 years. So, but thankfully, I'm on the other side of it now, but it was quite a process. And I actually did climb on that trip. I felt up to doing a couple little things. And then within within about a month, I was back climbing. We went on a big climbing trip to France. It's an annual trip we go on. So I was concerned, but I bouldered the entire time and was okay. But it was always in the back of my head, But I stayed training, actively progressing my ankle specifically during that entire time.
Mm.
I never let off.
Well,
Oh,
okay. So training is treatment. All right. I'm hearing that. I'm not sure I quite get the details. I mean, is it kind of anyway, so don't stop. Keep
don't stop.
moving. Probably, we're talking about millions of years of evolution. The body evolved to expect that you're going to be exercising all the time and moving not exercising, but moving all the time, because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise you're food for something further up on the food chain. And so when you're not moving, that's somehow not what the body is expecting, and you're interfering with its natural ability to heal itself. So, okay, so don't
Mm-hmm.
stop, but there must be some sort of like load management kind of a thing. If I'm trained, if you said like physical therapy versus training is really just all one thing. Maybe it's like on a continuum where I sort of have a level that I'm at, and I'm training to get better than that. And if I'm injured, what I'm training is to be better than the injured person, but I can't pretend to be the non-injured person, or can I? I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Some of that. So with my ankle as an example, that was acute, so it's different. You kind of have to define what injury is.
Yeah.
So
Well, go
if
ahead. Tell us
injury
about like
is
acute versus chronic.
yeah, so if you just have pain, that doesn't mean that you necessarily are injured, and that's the thing that we kind of just keep defaulting back to because it's how we've been, taught to think about pain.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're injured, and you can just sort of get build a relationship, so to speak, with your pain, so that if there's actually something worth barking at outside of the house, or if it's just barking and there's nothing to worry about. So it takes a long time to develop that relationship with your pain, and it's going to be trial and error. I hate to say, through these interviews I've had, people say, "Is that not frustrating to people?" And I'm like, "Well, I mean, I think it's just part of the process." So we can give you a compass, but there is no map.
Yeah. So this is not like taking an antibiotic and then the bug is killed and then you're better in 2 weeks. This is harder than that.
It is, yeah. That's just the nature of it. So the nature of the process, and it doesn't have to be frustrating. What I tell people is this is, we have a fix-it mentality about our health, and when we fix our pain, it's gone in our minds. That is not how it works. And if you build a relationship with your pain, if you build a relationship with your health, then you know that you're tending to things. You're not fixing things. So if you look for an end to this process, you're going to be frustrated all the time. There is no end. It is an ongoing process. And knowing that is very helpful. Knowing that, we give a garden analogy in the book. Knowing that, if you are tending to areas of the garden at some times of the year, and other times of the year you're doing other things, but there's going to be a day when it hails and all your tomatoes get ruined. But you grow tomatoes. And so, yes, it's a hard day. And I don't mean to demean or dismiss pain experiences, because I know how profound they can be, and they can be life altering. So, but just knowing that it is part of the process is helpful, very helpful. I was thinking about this interview, our talk, before we got on, and you cultivate a mindset. And I think some of my upbringing really helped with that, because we were on a constant comeback in my household. And it was just cultivated into it's how I came to think. And I didn't even realize that was part of it. So Matt actually interviewed me before we started writing this book for the comeback quotient. Isn't that right, Matt?
Yep.
Yeah. And I think he started out with, can you think of any stories about a comeback? And I was like, man, I was born into the comeback story. Like it was literally our week to week because you were either dealing with an injured horse, my dad was injured, or somebody was managing something all the time. And so it was just, I just knew that that's part of our daily activity. It's how you interact with living.
That's interesting. I have to say that in all of the, not just the episodes on the podcast where I've talked about pain, but my life as I've thought about pain and my own pain, it has never occurred to me. I've never heard anybody say that. Because when I was 10 years old, I had no pain in my body. I didn't have to, deal with pain. I didn't, I just didn't have any pain. And for me, at 61 years old, to think I want to get back to how I felt as a 10-year-old kid with a freshly minted body. That's just stupid. That's just not how it is. I mean, there's no part of me that I can get back to that 10-year-old kid. So why should pain be any different? And so this gardening, this managing of myself for, my state of mind, right? I do that for my recovery from my exercise, managing my diet, managing the number of calories I'm eating versus burning. I mean, there's a bunch of things I'm managing. And you're saying pain is just like that. You're recovering, things go bad, and you help your body to make it better. And you don't get frustrated by it. I mean, it's okay, I guess. You can be disappointed. I'm going to miss out on some fun. I'm going, I got a vacation planned and now I can't do as much of the fun as I was gonna. That's disappointing, but it's just bad timing. It's not like the end of the world. So that I think is very powerful.
I would ask if somebody told me that they weren't going to be, if they were going to go on a trip and because their pain was high at the time, if they weren't going to go play with their grandkids or with their partner, wife, husband, I would ask, why wouldn't you go play? Why wouldn't you go do that thing? If you're having a pain experience, I would say, I would advise that person to go and get involved. So avoiding activities can reinforce pain experiences. So it would be very important actually to participate. If you had a trip planned, and like I said, back pain is the one that almost everybody lives with. And knowing full well that you're not damaging anything, but it hurts, you bring more focus to the pain and less focus to your meaningful activities, those things that bring you happiness. And those things will actually help diminish your pain experience. So you don't want to start culling those things that are valuable to your life around your pain. In fact, I think a lot of times one of the examples another example that I give is if you had a floater in your eye and you went to an optometrist or an ophthalmologist and they said, I want you to focus on that and don't lose sight of it, then that is absolutely a recipe for insanity. And if we do that with pain, like if you go to see somebody and your entire conversation revolves around just pain and living around it, it is going to likely not be good for you. So, we all know that those floaters, we have them, but your nervous system eliminates them from your field of vision. So it's important, you can't be completely disrespectful of your pain experience, but it's important for you to do the things that bring joy to your life. And that will likely help that pain experience just fall to the background.
Yeah. It seems to me that, as an athlete, I have always been terrified of wrecking myself. And then I'm not myself anymore, right? And now I can't ever do that fun thing again. Whether it was a back problem from lifting something too heavy or blowing out a knee, and now I'm never going to be right. So I was always really terrified, maybe is too big of a word, but it was always in the back of my mind. So how do I know that I'm not hurting myself? How do I know that, even though maybe you're saying mostly, but sometimes it is a bad thing, right? It's acute, right? I jumped out of a car going down the highway and I'm hurting. Okay, well, I probably did something bad. Or are you saying no?
Well, if you jumped out of a car, there was something else going on.
Well, yeah, but I hurt now, and I'm just not sure I should just ignore that.
Yeah, if you lifted something, which is rarely the case, to be honest. Usually people, it's like grabbing a jar of peanut butter, and they're like, "Oh dear God."
Oh yeah, I've done that too.
It's not, lifting their max on deadlift, which is what everybody or many people think. They're like, oh, yeah, that's when I'm going to hurt myself. It's rarely the case when you hurt yourself. When I say hurt, again, we have to distinguish injury from pain.
Yeah.
Those are different things. So, but if you had an acute something happen, and if you had, like a neurological deficit, so to speak. Like if you had nothing, numbness, something like that, or wasting over time, that's different. But still, that tissue heals with use. It literally heals with use. So it has to get reintroduced to load. It has to get reintroduced to demands. So it's a matter of, gently start working even with acute. Like my ankle, the next day, this is me. I would not ask anybody else to do this, but the next day I was like, let's see what kind of hopping I can do. And
hopping on the injured ankle.
I would not ask anybody else to do that. But yes, that is what I did.
Because I would have been hopping on the good ankle.
But that is exactly what I did. I just reintroduced work to it and was like, what will this ankle tolerate right now?
Okay.
And weirdly enough, I didn't have tons of pain with my ankle. Every once in a while I would. It was really weird. It was part of the roller coaster. But it was so injured. My stability in that ankle was so bad that I'm an okay athlete, and people saw me fall down standing talking to somebody. It was so unstable. So, but weirdly enough, it didn't hurt that bad. So, yeah.
Okay.
But even with those injuries, reintroducing load, work, that's how we recover psychologically, it's going right back toward the thing.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if the bone is sticking out of your leg, that's
different.
That probably is different. Yeah.
That's different. But with just a pain experience, with 99% of back pain is not of medical concern. That is actually a real statistic. Less than 1% is of a medical concern. I can't remember the exact number, but it's less than 1% of a medical concern. So that doesn't mean that your back doesn't hurt. It obviously hurts. But you can go toward your activities and not worry about actually damaging anything.
Okay. Well, yeah, 1% is a good bet. That works.
All right.
All right. So, again, in your book, you talk about a 3-step process. You want to tell us about this? And maybe when you talk about this process, you can speak of it in terms of, it's kind of a way of maybe you came up with a 3-step process because you were writing a book. And really what it is a way of thinking about this and a way to build confidence and things like that. But, for a person who maybe would want to give it a try, what would they do?
Right. I've tried to get better at explaining this and using principles instead of 3-step process. You can think of a 3-step process in a corkscrew, trending toward the positive.
Okay.
So, if somebody comes to see me, I'll break down sort of a session. If somebody came to see me and they had knee pain, if they were a cyclist, and then I would say, and it actually, is irritated during cycling. Incidentally, they probably have an event coming up. They're probably going to do Leadville because that's usually when these things happen.
Right.
So they've probably built all of this expectation into this event, and now all of a sudden their sleep is getting messed up. They have this knee pain. They think that it's their new cleats that they just started wearing. So we're going to start basically. I will
And it's
listen.
bone on bone, right? And their night.
And it's probably bone on bone. And they're not going to be able to ride a bike anymore. Their doctor actually told them to find a different sport.
Yeah.
Because they're too old. They're doing, yeah.
Okay. This sounds like a legit scenario.
So I would sit with that person, listen to that breakdown, and then we would come up with, we would basically put out some of those alarms that have been set off, and try to bring some better context to, their knee that hurts. And then we would build out a program that included riding, because they are a cyclist, unless it was just so hot and bothered that it wouldn't even tolerate sitting on a bicycle or the sight of a bicycle. So if the bicycle rolled in the room and their knee was like, oh my God, I can't do it. Then at that point, we would, what we would do is we would have them like imagine a bicycle. So graded motor imagery is a real thing. So, which I have actually used with some folks. So we start building out this little process, and this is the more complicated version of what you asked about. But we would get some exercises together that we collaboratively get together, that where they feel like they have sense of agency about helping their knee feel better. It's not necessarily that the tissue has to change in order for that pain to change, but we know that exercise helps most people. We don't understand exactly why it helps, because it doesn't always require the tissue to change. But that person and I would start building a little set of exercises together and a training program together, meaning we would tinker with their training a bit and then touch base, ever so often. Some people are in such a bad place, a rough place, that I want to hear back from them sooner than later. But as soon as I can make it so that they feel like they're good to go on their own, the better. It's not a good business plan, but it is a fantastic care plan. So helping them feel like they have good locus of control over the situation is my ultimate goal. At the back of the book, there's a QR code. I don't know if you saw that, and we go through foot, ankle, knee, hip, back, and it is progressed exercises. And there's an intro video also that gives some guidelines, but it's progressed exercises where, like, entry level exercises that feel very safe for something that feels really bugged. And you can just start there with those really simple exercises, and then just keep working up. And you can mix and match those exercises to whatever recipe sort of suits you.
And this works for both acute injuries and chronic pain.
Yeah, with, so if you actually had a bone injury, then that bone needs to heal. So that's different for sure. So once your bone heals, though, then start doing whatever it will tolerate. Or if you have, a full ruptured Achilles, then there's a protocol for that thing to heal. And you sort of have to follow that protocol. So if you're post-op, or if you've had a significant bone injury, that's a little different. But those are the rare cases. So, but still, it's a matter of like that part starting to tolerate load, use, demands as soon as it's through its healing phase.
So even if I've got discoloration and bruising, meaning that there was some blood that was released from capillaries, as long as, I don't have a broken bone or a completely severed tendon, something like that.
Yes. So hamstring is the one that everybody goes to. I don't know if that's what you were thinking about.
No.
But if you have bruising or deformation with a hamstring injury, it's still reintroducing load. Obviously, if you've had you actually have injured some tissue, so it's different because pain and injury aren't the same. So they're two different things. But yeah, it's still reintroducing load. So I was talking to somebody a couple weeks ago, and I tried to make it clear you can diagnose medical condition through objective measurements. So if you have a medical condition that has a protocol for its healing that is different than diagnosing pain, they are not the same thing. So you can treat a medical condition that has a protocol, but you're not treating pain. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You're following some proven methodology for healing some damage, but
Right.
maybe that doesn't have pain, or maybe that doesn't solve the pain because you're going to deal with the pain separately.
Yeah, very often Achilles ruptures do not hurt. Yeah, a full thickness rupture. What people usually report is I thought somebody kicked me.
Yeah. My dad said that he thought somebody shot him.
Yeah.
Because I think in his head, he heard a noise, right?
Yeah, but it probably was pain-free.
Yeah.
And that's very often the case. So, yeah, and then you go to take a step and something feels wonky.
Right. Okay, good. I have a couple of other questions, but is there more? The QR codes for getting to the videos, that's very helpful. But is there anything else to further describe that? I guess the acute issues, you've got to deal with that. And if you are being treated by your doctor, you said, do what the doctor says to do, but that's separate from this load management thing and building yourself back up and being confident. Getting back to the whole pain is kind of like an emotion kind of a thing. And it's like, you got to help the part of your brain that you don't control to, be comfortable with what's going on. And its predicting of the future does not include disaster, because it's going to try to get you to not do the disastrous thing when it thinks that's the future.
Yeah.
Okay. So, painkillers. What do you think about painkillers? NSAIDs, but anything else really? I used to live on vitamin I. So, if there's a way of dying from ibuprofen, that's how I'm going to die. I've eaten so much of it. Now, not for 10 years, but what do you think about painkillers? At
one time?
No, I wasn't overdosing. It was just over the years, I was just pounding it. Yeah. I would take it prophylactically. I would take ibuprofen before I started exercising.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people still do that. But there was a piece of research that came out last year sometime that showed a link between chronic usage of NSAIDs and the development of chronic pain, persistent pain. And it was pretty strong.
So you should not do that if you want to avoid persistent pain.
Yes, we have our own endogenous system of painkillers that are on board. So learning to use those is a better way.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's a place. Don't get me wrong. There's a place for an NSAID.
Yeah. If you've had a surgery or something, shoot, you want to sleep, I guess, right? Sleeping is good.
There's a time and place. I don't want this to sound like I'm a paleotherapist, where I'm like,
right. You're not a puritanical healer.
No.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next thing. The word that comes to my mind, and I'm not sure if it's an official word, but niggles. And the idea is, this would be the thing that happens to me. I'm in the gym and I'm doing calf raises, and suddenly I go, ooh, I just felt something Like, did something just pull, or was it just about to pull? And, when I was 25 years old, I'd just say, well, I got 3 more sets to do. And I'd do them. And, and maybe I was a little extra sore, but, by my next workout, I was fine. But as I got older, sometimes that meant, in fact, most of the time that meant nothing. But sometimes that meant the next rep, I was done for 3 months.
Is
And
this an actual occurrence?
Well, yes. Not today, but in the past. What I learned was that when I start to feel a little something, I just say, it's better for me to just lose the rest of my workout than to lose the next 3 months, even though it's only a 1 in 100 chance that that the bad thing is going to happen. But I heal so much more slowly than I used to, and I would probably lose my fitness faster than I used to, that I just don't push it as much. Now, that's just a fear-based thing. I don't know whether that's legit. What do you think?
I think we associate a lot of things to our age that are unjustly associated to our age. I can tell you that we have an 11-year-old, and he is hurt every day. There isn't a day that goes by that he's not like, something hurts.
Is it something different every day? Because if it was different every day, then that sounds like me when I was a kid. But nowadays, it's the same thing every day.
So I think, personally, as an aging athlete, we have to be careful associating things with our age. And the honey that I've consumed as an athlete through my entire life has always come with bees. And that is just how it goes.
That's a good story, yeah.
And so the follow-up to that is, a lot of times you don't have to stop. Just change it a little bit. So if you're doing calf raises, you're on a calf machine, then honestly, go to one leg, go to the leg that hurts, and try to do a single one. And if it won't tolerate it, there are so many ways to use our bodies that it's not just stop or start. It's not an either or, mindset. It's a if then. And so you constantly are just sort of if thenning instead of either oring. So if you have something where you go, oh wow, did not like the calf machine today, then go try something else with your calves.
Just something a little different. Okay. All right. And so one more question, and that is this. A lot of what you have been describing, let's just say everything you've been describing, I could see myself doing that, except for when the pain that I had, and this is fresh in my mind. It's not a current thing, but it was in the last year, that my knees would hurt so badly, and there was nothing wrong with them. I knew it. But they hurt it was so sharp that there really was no working through it. It was so torturous that I couldn't work through it. What would you advise in that case?
So did you confirm that there was nothing wrong with them through imaging?
No, it was both knees at the same time, and I did nothing to cause anything to happen. So anyway, that's what it's a guess, but I think it's a good guess.
Yeah, I do too. If you came into the shop, then I would ask, what have you done that is novel? Or was there anything novel introduced into your activities? Because a lot of times you could call that a spike in your training.
Yeah.
If you did a totally new thing where you did a bunch of cutting, like if you decided to do ultimate frisbee one day and you're like, oh, for some reason my knees blew up. So, or I would also ask, what are your allostatic stressors in this time? Were there other life stressors? Did you have an ailing parent? Were there other things going on that you have not yet related to? Oh, my knees hurt, and I forgot my mom's in hospice. those kinds of things matter to pain experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to bring that to the table with what you're going through. So, but with regard to they were just completely intolerant to anything, I would say that's not true. I would say if I saw you that day, I have had people come into the shop in tears and say, I don't know why I didn't call you to say I couldn't come today. I don't know how I got out of bed. And then left doing so much work at the shop that they were like, I don't know how I just worked out for an hour when I could barely get out of bed, an hour and a half ago.
What would you say is the reason that they could?
There's always a way. There is always a way. So you just kind of have to find that little way. Like a lot of times, I feel like if you had come, and there's a time. So I don't want to sound like I'm saying just suck it up. I'm not saying David Goggins your way through your pain experience. I'm saying there is almost always a way to reintroduce some movement, and it might be gentle. And there might be a day when you actually do just need to let them chill out. There might even be a few days when they need to chill out, but almost always you can get work to a painful area, and it will almost always be well received if you find the right way in.
Okay. So if you manage the load, some kind of activity is going to be better than none almost all the time.
Yeah, like back squats that day, that might not be your best bet. But there are many other ways to work quadriceps, or, you don't have to go to those default exercises. There's a million ways to use your quads and knees.
Right. They all hurt. But not anymore. That's the good news. I think that, what you were alluding to was life stress is what was, whether it was directly the stress or then the stress somehow knocking my sleep, and now I wasn't recovering right, and whatever just sort of snowballed into, and it went to some place that I was the most afraid of, right? My knees.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway,
yeah, the more valuable an area is to you, the more valuable a part is to you, the more protective your nervous system is going to be of that part.
That all hangs together. I mean, it makes sense to me. Okay, well, those were my questions. If I was smarter, what should I have asked you? But I didn't ask. And then let's wrap up with how people can find you guys and your book and talks that you give, and tell us again about these videos.
Sure. You can read more about me at paragonathletics.com. There's not much more information. You probably learned a lot during this. We do have a ton of videos on YouTube. There's over 60 something videos, I think almost 70. And we're going to continue to add those. They're totally free because I'm terrible at business, but I'm really good at helping people.
Oh, that's nice. There's so many of the other kind that, that's a refreshing change.
So I'm hoping there haven't been many copies that have gotten out just yet. It's been back ordered. But even with the few copies that have gotten out, thankfully we have gotten some feedback that it has been a very helpful book. Yeah, even just a few messages to people I don't know from people I don't know.
Oh.
So, which is really encouraging because that is exactly what I was hoping for.
Excellent. Well, it must feel good. It must feel good to be helping people. Congratulations. And so how can people find you? You want to say websites, that sort of thing?
Yeah. MattFitzgerald.org is my personal website. You can learn more about Dream Run Camp here in Flagstaff, Arizona at dreamruncamp.com, and then 8020endurance.com for training plans and other resources.
Fantastic. And your business, Ryan, is
Paragon Athletics.
Paragon Athletics.
Paragonathletics.com. I think there are quite a few videos on there even also. So
you
Fantastic.
think?
It's not my side of it, Matt. Matt knows by this point that that's not my side of the business.
Okay. Well,
there are a bunch of videos on there on our website.
Well, fantastic. Well, good. It's always possible to find people who are good at putting the videos on a website. It's not easy to find a person who can help you with your pain. So you focused on the right thing. Good for you. All right, guys. Well, this was great. Thank you very much. And you guys enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah,
thanks, Joe.
You guys too. Thank you for having us.
Okay. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining my conversation with Ryan Whited and Matt Fitzgerald, authors of Pain and Performance.